The story begins in a small town where dreams were often left behind in the dust of reality. In this town lived a young student, full of potential but weighed down by circumstances. Growing up in a home where money was tight and expectations were stricter than love, they learned early on that dreaming too big only led to disappointment. The father worked long shifts at a factory, hands calloused and back bent, while the mother stretched every dollar to keep food on the table. Education, in their eyes, was a luxury, not a necessity. "We work, we survive, and we stay together," the father often said, dismissing any talk of college as a foolish fantasy. But the child saw beyond the narrow streets and broken dreams of their town. School was their sanctuary, books were their escape, and the idea of college wasn't just about education. It was freedom, a way to break the cycle that had trapped their family for generations. Yet, every time they voiced their ambitions, the family's response was the same: "Who's going to help us if you leave?" It wasn't just about money. It was about control, about fear, about a deep-rooted belief that if one person left, they might never come back. And so, every time the student thought about the future, guilt wrapped around them like chains, tightening with every passing year. Despite the discouragement at home, they refused to let their dreams die quietly. Late at night, while the house slept, they worked on applications, filling out scholarship forms with trembling hands, hoping that someone out there would see their worth. They had no money for college, no savings, no rich relatives to lend a helping hand. All they had was their determination and the relentless belief that they were meant for more. Every rejection email stung like a fresh wound, but they pushed forward, applying again and again, sacrificing sleep, social life, and even their own happiness to chase an opportunity that felt impossible. Their teachers noticed the effort, their friends cheered them on, but at home, there was only silence. Their family never asked about their dreams, never acknowledged their late-night struggles. And so, it became a secret battle, a fight between what they wanted and what their family expected. Then, one day, an envelope arrived, one that could have changed everything. A full scholarship to a prestigious university. A lifeline, a ticket to a future they had only dared to imagine. But they never saw it. Because the moment it arrived, it was taken from them. Their mother opened the letter first, her eyes scanning the words, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and terror. If their child left, who would help with bills? Who would carry the burden of this household? Who would ensure the family stayed together? Without hesitation, she made the decision. She hid the letter, tucking it away in a drawer, and pretended it never existed. Days turned into weeks, and the silence of that missing letter altered the course of their life. The student waited, hoping for a response, checking the mailbox every morning with a growing sense of dread. Maybe they had been rejected. Maybe their efforts had been for nothing. Their hope dimmed, then flickered out entirely. And just like that, they stopped dreaming. Instead of packing for college, they took a job at the local store, clocking in hours that drained them physically and emotionally. The world that once felt full of possibilities now felt suffocating, like a prison with invisible bars. Life moved forward, but something inside them remained stuck in that moment, in the unknown fate of the letter they never received. The years blurred together. Their friends left town, chasing dreams in faraway cities. While they remained, their days a monotonous cycle of work and duty. Regret settled deep in their bones, a silent companion that whispered late at night, "What if?" But there was no going back. At least, that's what they thought. Then, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. It happened on an ordinary evening, while sorting through old papers in a forgotten corner of the house. Their fingers brushed against an envelope, its edges yellowed with time. Curiosity turned to shock as they pulled it out, recognizing the university's emblem before they even opened it. The moment their eyes landed on the words, "Congratulations on your full scholarship," the world seemed to tilt. Their breath caught in their throat, hands trembling as they read the letter over and over, as if trying to make sense of a reality that had been stolen from them. A tidal wave of emotions crashed over them: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. How could their own family do this? How could they make such a life-altering decision without even telling them? It wasn't just about education anymore. It was about trust. About the years lost. About the opportunities that had been buried beneath selfish fears. They confronted their parents, demanding answers, their voice shaking with the weight of suppressed pain. The mother's eyes welled with tears, the father looked away, guilt heavy in his silence. "We were afraid," the mother admitted. "Afraid you'd leave and never look back. Afraid we'd lose you." It was a confession laced with love and selfishness, with protection and control. The student stood there, caught between two worlds, the past that had been stolen from them and the present that still held choices. They wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand justice for the years that had slipped through their fingers. But anger wouldn't fix anything. Yelling wouldn't bring back time. The only question that mattered now was, what next? The answer didn't come easily. There was no simple solution, no way to undo the past. But there was a way forward. Instead of sinking into resentment, they made a decision. They wouldn't let this betrayal define them. They wouldn't let lost years become an excuse for an unlived life. It wasn't too late. It would never be too late. With a newfound determination, they started looking for opportunities again. Maybe they couldn't go back to that university, but there were other paths, other chances. Online courses, night school, career programs, options that hadn't existed back then but were available now. And as they stepped toward their future, they carried a lesson with them. Sometimes, the people who love you the most can also hold you back the most, not out of malice, but out of fear. And the only way to break free is to forgive, not for them, but for yourself. Because in the end, dreams delayed are not always dreams denied. The weight of betrayal lingered in the air like an unspoken curse. The student had confronted their family, had listened to the tearful confessions, had felt the ache of years lost in silence. But what came next? The question gnawed at them, clawing at their peace. They tried to go on as if nothing had changed, but how could they? Every morning, they woke up with the heavy knowledge that their life had been rerouted, not by fate, but by those who were supposed to love them. And yet, love had been the very thing that had shackled them. But the truth remained. Life did not wait for resentment to fade. Bills still needed to be paid, work still needed to be done, and now an even heavier burden rested on their shoulders. The family that had once feared losing them now found themselves in a crisis far greater than separation. The years of struggling, of barely getting by, had finally caught up with them. Their father, once strong and unyielding, was slowing down. The mother, who had hidden the letter out of fear, was now facing a new fear. Their financial security was crumbling. The family business, the one they had sacrificed so much for, was on the verge of collapse. And now, all eyes turned to the one person they had once held back. The student who was no longer just a child but an adult, staring at a future they had not chosen, burdened with responsibilities they had not agreed to carry. The weight of responsibility pressed down like a mountain, suffocating and merciless. It would have been easy to surrender, to let bitterness guide their choices. After all, why should they help the very people who had stolen their dream? Why should they stay and sacrifice once more when they had already lost so much? But then, another realization crept in. This was no longer about the past. This was about the present, about the people who had wronged them but also loved them in their own flawed way. About a family that, despite its mistakes, was still theirs. And so, they did not walk away. But they did not surrender either. Instead, they took a step toward something they had never considered before, a way to balance both their dreams and their duty. They would not let the past define them, but they would not abandon their family either. It was not a choice between escape or entrapment. It was a choice to redefine what the future could look like. And just as they made that decision, fate, in its strange and twisted way, presented an unexpected opportunity. It came in the form of a voice from the past, a mentor, a teacher, an old friend, someone who had once seen their potential, had once believed in them before the world had forced them to believe otherwise. The mentor reached out, not with sympathy, but with an offer. "It's not too late," they said. "I know someone, a program, an opportunity. It's not what you imagined, but it's a way forward." The student hesitated. The thought of starting over, of chasing something again, felt both thrilling and terrifying. But there was another fear too, the fear of losing more time. They had seen years slip through their fingers, had watched their dreams gather dust in an attic. hidden away like a shameful secret. Could they afford to take another risk? And what about the family? How could they walk away now, when everything was falling apart? The questions circled like vultures, ready to feast on any shred of hope left inside them. But then another thought emerged. What if this was the only way to break the cycle? What if this wasn't about choosing between family and self, but about finding a new way forward, one where they could help without losing themselves in the process? The realization hit like a tidal wave. The world had always painted choices in black and white, either stay and sacrifice or leave and abandon. But what if there was a third option? A way to help their family without giving up everything they had ever wanted. And so they made a choice. They would not stay trapped in guilt, nor would they run away in anger. They would rebuild, both their life and their families. But it would be on their own terms. They took the opportunity that had been offered, stepping into a world that had once felt unreachable. They enrolled in a program, one that allowed them to work while studying, one that did not require them to leave completely but gave them the freedom to carve their own path. It was not easy. Every day was a battle against exhaustion, against doubt, against the voices in their head that whispered, "You're too late." But every step forward was a victory, no matter how small. And in those victories, something remarkable happened. The family that had once held them back now began to see them in a different light. Their parents, once so afraid of losing them, now saw the strength they had underestimated. They saw that love was not about control, that family was not about holding each other back, but about lifting each other up. The business was still struggling, but now, instead of shouldering the burden alone, they worked together to find solutions. Maybe it was restructuring the business, maybe it was looking for new opportunities, maybe it was simply learning to adapt instead of clinging to old ways. But the most important change was not in their finances. It was in their understanding of one another. The student, once just a child desperate for approval, was now an adult who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that forgiveness was not about letting others off the hook, but about freeing yourself from the chains of resentment. And so, step by step, they rebuilt. Their education was no longer just a dream. It was a reality, a testament to perseverance. Their family, once divided by fear, was now learning to grow together. And in the end, the lesson was clear. Life does not always go the way we plan. People will disappoint us. Opportunities will be stolen. Time will be lost. But as long as we are breathing, we have a choice. A choice to stay trapped in the past or to carve a new future. And sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is not to seek revenge or dwell in regret, but to rise above, to redefine our own story, and to prove, most of all to ourselves, that dreams delayed are not dreams denied. Rebuilding was never meant to be easy. Every morning, they woke up with the weight of responsibility pressing on their shoulders, the weight of their past, the weight of their dreams, and the weight of the family that still depended on them. But now, there was a difference. This time, they weren't drowning under the pressure. This time, they were building something new, something that allowed them to chase their ambitions while still standing by those they loved. It wasn't perfect. Some days, exhaustion crept in like a thief, stealing their energy, making them question whether they had made the right decision. Their work was demanding, their studies were relentless, and the family business still wavered between survival and collapse. But amidst the chaos, they had found a rhythm, a way to balance their ambitions and their obligations without losing themselves in the process. It required sacrifice, but this time, it was a sacrifice they chose, not one forced upon them. And with that choice came power. They had spent years believing that their fate was in someone else's hands, but now they saw the truth. Their life was their own to shape. The past had stolen years, but it had also given them something invaluable: resilience, wisdom, and the unshakable knowledge that they were capable of overcoming anything. Slowly, the relationship with their parents began to shift. The same family that had once tried to control them now started to see them in a new light. The mother, who had hidden the letter out of fear, began to realize the true cost of her actions. She saw the exhaustion in her child's eyes, the long hours spent juggling responsibilities, the relentless drive to create a future that should have come years ago. Regret settled in her heart like a heavy stone, but so did understanding. She had spent years believing that love meant protection, that keeping her child close was the only way to ensure their safety. But now, she saw the truth. Real love was about trust. It was about letting go, about believing that the ones you love are strong enough to find their own way. And so, for the first time, she did something she had never done before. She apologized. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, there were silences that stretched too long, and there were words that had been left unsaid for too many years. But in the end, there was also healing. The father, too, softened. He had always been a man of few words, of quiet sacrifices and unspoken expectations. But now, he looked at his child and saw not just a son or daughter, but a fighter, someone who had faced the impossible and refused to break. And in that moment, he did something he had never done before. He told them he was proud. With the weight of the past finally beginning to lift, the student found themselves moving forward in a way they never thought possible. Their education, once a stolen dream, was now a living reality. Their family, once their greatest obstacle, was now becoming their greatest support. But the biggest transformation wasn't just in their circumstances, it was in their mindset. For years, they had believed that success was about proving something, about escaping their old life and building something entirely new. But now, they saw a different truth. Success wasn't about running away. It was about breaking the cycle, about creating a future where no one in their family, no younger sibling or cousin or child, would ever have to face the same struggles. And so, they did something unexpected. They turned their pain into purpose. They began mentoring younger members of their family, teaching them about opportunities, about education, about the choices they never knew they had. They helped their family business adapt, bringing in new ideas, modern solutions, ways to keep it from collapsing under the weight of outdated traditions. They reached out to others in their community, to young people who had once felt as trapped as they did, showing them that there was always a way forward, even when it seemed impossible. The journey wasn't easy. There were still setbacks, still moments of doubt, still nights when exhaustion threatened to pull them under. But through it all, they kept going, because now, they weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't, for every dream that had ever been hidden away in a drawer, for every person who had ever felt like their future had been decided for them. And in that fight, they found something they had never expected: peace. Not the kind that comes from an easy life, but the kind that comes from knowing you have done everything in your power to build the life you deserve. The kind that comes from knowing that, despite everything, you have won. And so, in the end, the lesson was clear. Life will not always be fair. People will let you down. Opportunities will be stolen. And time, once lost, can never truly be regained. But none of that means you are powerless. None of that means you should give up. Because the truth is, as long as you are breathing, as long as there is even the smallest chance, you have the power to change your story. You have the power to reclaim your future. And sometimes, the greatest success is not in having a perfect life, but in finding the strength to rise again, to carve your own path, and to prove, to yourself, above all else, that dreams delayed are not dreams denied.